This week on the Doughnut Box Podcast, we talk about how Chris dated the head coach's daughter and almost got me kicked off the football team.
Sorry, buddy. Did not mean to get you kicked off the football team.
Hey, it's okay. You didn't actually get me off. It was close. But then we talk about the jail report and plenty of interesting arrest stories that happen, followed by the Doughnut Hole, where I quiz Chris on the origins of certain sayings. Will he get all 10 questions right? We're going to find out.
I don't know. I've been playing a lot of trivia cracks, so we may see. And then on What Fries My Doughnuts, hear about me ranting about politics. Now, it's not going to be a political rant, but there are some things that got me fried up this week, and I'm going to try to make them as kind and as nice as possible. But you're going to have to tune into the episode to find out. With that being said, let's roll the intro.
Hi, I'm Micah.
And I'm Chris.
And we've been friends for over 20 years.
Surprisingly, we haven't killed each other yet. Years ago, we started our own variety show, and it sucked.
Now that we're adults, we decided to give it another try. Like in the movie, life is like a box of donuts. You never know which one's gonna be the next one.
Wait a second, it's chocolates.
Oh, right. Okay, well, let's start the show.
This is the Doughnut Box Podcast.
All right, Chris. Hey, another week, episode 11 of season 4. We are here live in color, in person. No, I'm joking. If you haven't seen us here in person, if you're listening to us over on Spotify, Apple Music, or any of the other podcast streaming services that we're on, iHeart, that sort of thing, RSS, please come find us over on YouTube. And that is at the Doughnut Box Podcast. That's DOUGHBOX Podcast. I misspelled it. It's been a very long day. You know what I mean. Doughnut, N-U-T, Box Podcast. There you go. So,
deal.
Hey, listen, I kind of messed that up, but that's okay. All right, man. Well, we have an excellent episode for you today. We are back to our regularly scheduled program. And as you know, if you've listened to the podcast before, we have a structure and a format. I want to digress and say one thing first. We really, our hearts go out to the families and the loved ones and also the friends, colleagues, whoever you're connected with about the plane crash that happened, the American Airlines flight in D.C. that collided with the Black Hawk and the U.S. Army helicopter there. It was just such a tragic event. Typically, you know, plane crashes really are near and dear to my heart because aviation is a passion of mine. However, this one really was hard to see because, you know, anytime there are no survivors, it is always a very harrowing deal. And so we really, our heart goes out to you guys from the Doughnut Box Podcast, and we'll be praying for you guys, absolutely. But after that, let's get to some more fun stuff here. And our first segment, which is the old-fashioned donut, which is a story from our past. Now, as we alluded to in the intro, Chris dated the head coach's daughter, which almost got me into some hot water. And so let's talk about that. So, Chris, let's talk about how this whole little fling started, if you will.
Oh, lovely. So Micah and I did not go to the same school. So
luckily, thank God, because if we did, we would have gotten in too much trouble. But go ahead.
Yeah, so we were at church, all of us together, and then our friend, who we shall call Sven, we will call him Sven, and he brought this girl. He was dating this girl at the time, but Sven's mom was very controlling, and so he was not allowed to date this girl anymore, and so like we hung out with her, and I got introduced to her friend group and all that stuff. So we were just hanging out, and I really liked her other friend, but I guess during this time, I learned that she kind of went from guy to guy. Like it was just kind of like whoever was around and the most emotionally available. And so I was a nice guy and I was emotionally available. And I remember her being upset that, I almost said his real name, that Sven dumped her, and like, you know, the mom wasn't, and that was a whole deal with a whole confrontation that I had to get, because he thought I stole his girl when I really didn't. But
not to be blunt, but it was because mommy told him no. No,
yeah,
sorry.
So we started dating, and then she was like my actual first official girlfriend when I was a senior in high school. So I hadn't dated any other, like I had talking to some other girls and I had like, was interested, but I didn't have like a official girlfriend until senior year, which is crazy. And so we started dating, and I remember her being like, "Oh yeah, like she is or her dad was the head football coach at Micah's school." And so I was kind of
Yes, he
like,
was.
"Oh, I didn't know this." Like, I kind of knew it, but I didn't know it. And so Micah, like, me and Micah hung out all the time, and I ended up going to like a couple of his games because, like, number one, to support Micah, but also two, because she was my girlfriend and her dad was the head. So do you guys remember, if you, maybe I'm dating myself, but that movie, Remember the Titans? Remember that movie? Remember
Oh
the
yeah,
Titans?
definitely.
She was like the little girl from Remember the Titans who really liked football, and then if
Except she was a
anybody,
teenager.
yeah, if anybody, yeah, if anybody talked bad about her dad, she was not having it. Like, she would get really, really mad. So I remember that. I can go into some other details, but Micah, do you want to talk about how that affected you playing
Yeah.
football?
Yeah, absolutely. So this happened again. So I'm a year younger than Chris because I got to go through the fourth grade 2 times. I was that special. So, fourth grade the first time and the second time. But that means that I was not the same grade as Chris. So I was a junior in high school at the time. And this was the first year. So I had played a little bit my sophomore year and things like that. But junior year was the year that I was starting. And, things were going really, really well. So I remember this gal started coming to our church because of old Sven. That's the whole reason. And I think really a lot of the reason we got acquainted was because we were all on the tech team together. So when we were at youth group, we kind of switched off, but Christopher and I, we would either run lyrics or lights, one of the two, just what it sounds like. Like, we would make the lights happen because we had a fancy light system. And then not just that, but, we had to put the lyrics of the songs onto the screen. And so we kind of split that role. Now, Sven was the sound guy. He was consistently the sound guy. And so, of course, being the sound guy, he's like literally right there beside us almost. And so this gal was there. And I knew her. I knew her vaguely. She also did not go to my school. Weirdly enough, like, her dad was the coach, sure, but she went to a Catholic private school, a very prominent one in the area, actually. And so we were acquainted just very, very briefly the few times that I saw her because of football. And again, it's the head coach's daughter, so you're like, stay away from her. Like, I'm not trying to do anything like that. And so when her and Chris started becoming interested in each other, I remember it was practice one day, and it was a really hot day, one of those typical Georgia summer days. It was like 103 degrees out, really humid and everything. And I remember getting done with practice, and I remember this coach, and we'll call him Coach Martin, and he calls me up after practice, and we just got done with running and conditioning. And so he's like, I want to see you after practice. And typically that's not a good thing. Typically, if you're being seen after practice, it's because you've gotten in trouble or your grades are not good or something is going on. So I was sitting here like, oh boy, what's going on and things like that. And I knew him and Chris, or I'm sorry, him and his daughter and Chris were all, they were kind of talking at this point. And so he calls me over there and was like, hey, I'm aware that your best friend is like looking to date my daughter. Tell me a little bit more about this guy because I don't know about him. Like, I don't really know about him. What would you say? And don't lie to me. Like, I remember that was the biggest thing. He's like, don't you lie to me about this guy. Like, tell me how it actually is. And I was like, nah, man, he's a good guy. He's not going to hurt your daughter and things like that. Internally, I'm going, God, Chris, don't let me down, man. And so I was like, and at the time, I knew that, as he alluded to, he was actually interested in somebody else in her friend group. Like, he wasn't initially interested in her. And so you remember me having this conversation with you. You came over to my house and I was like, don't you screw this up for me. Like,
Yeah,
I remember having this whole conversation.
you were like, dude, don't
Like,
mess this up for me. I'm in a good position. Don't mess it up.
like, I was like, I'm finally starting. The coach likes me. All the coaches like me. Like, we're to a place where I'm actually playing and things like that. Like, please don't screw this up for me. Don't break her heart. I was like, just be the typical guy that you are, but please don't also pivot to her friend. Like, as much as her friend might show you attention, like, you dating her, don't screw this up with me, right? And so at that point too, I wouldn't say that I was worried, but the part that I was worried about was not necessarily with Chris. It was more with her because, like Chris alluded to, she was kind of going from guy to guy. And us and Sven, to that point, there was even a meeting. If you're from the South, you know
At
what
the
the
Bojangles.
Bojangles is. Yeah, we
I'll
went
never
over to the
forget that.
Bojangles. We went over to the Bojangles, and Chris and him try to reconcile a little bit. As far as, I understand I'm with your girl now, but it's because y'all broke up, and he was on this impression of like, nah, yeah, like you stole her from me, even though like his mom made them break up. It was this whole thing, and so I was already like, man, I know that she's already, if she's gonna hop from guy to guy like that, I already know that she's gonna tell some lies. Like I already know, like
Yeah.
she's gonna be that type of way.
Michael,
So go ahead,
Mike
Chris.
was a good friend. He went with me as backup.
Listen, I wasn't 100% that he wasn't going to try to nuck and buck with you in that parking lot.
But do you remember I think he brought backup too, because remember he brought Sheepley. Remember?
Yeah, he did. He
Remember
did.
that?
And what ended up happening, what was funny was we were sitting there talking all at the table. And at a certain point, he's like, I want it to be one-on-one. And I remember me and Sheepley, we went outside to the car. And like, I remember we popped the trunk. We were like sitting in the trunk, like, but just eyes peeled on you guys, making sure like, hey, it ain't about to get into a fight and whatnot. So it was kind of a crazy time. But yeah, so to that point, it was pretty, it was pretty hairy to that point. And so I didn't know how truthful she was going to be to this situation, to this point.
She was an only child. Well, she wasn't an only child. So her dad had been married before, and he had 2 kids from his first marriage. And shout out because his eldest son just passed away. So shout out if you're listening, shout out to you. Sorry for your loss, all that stuff. So her mom and her dad, she was the only child of them, and so she was very spoiled, like very, very spoiled. And so like, put it to you this way, like she was one of those, like, I'm celebrating my birth month. Like I have to have
The
presents,
whole month.
presents, and actual birthday presents. And I was like, okay. So yeah, it was weird. And like her mom was actually nicer to me than she was. And like, because her mom was probably like, oh yeah, this is a good guy. Like I remember during Christmas, her mom was the one who got me the Christmas gifts. Like she didn't get me any Christmas gifts. Like my girlfriend, she didn't. Her mom did. And I remember like I spent a lot of money like on her. I took her to an NFL professional game. I took her because she was a big Cam Newton fan because she loved Auburn. And then when Cam Newton went to go play for the Panthers, I took her to a Panthers game. And so, full circle moment. But
Yeah.
But yeah, so did that. And then I just remember she was like very, not demanding, but she was very like, I would say, yeah, spoiled is a good word. Spoiled is a good word.
Definitely.
So, and the reason why I didn't like pursue
Which my cat's making a cameo right now. Sorry.
Hey, Doughnut Box listeners, say what's up to Micah's cat.
This is Blanche, the cat. Yes, she's making a cameo. She looks so happy to make this cameo right now, but she loves sitting in my lap, so she's all over me right now. So pardon me if the cat gets in the way. Go ahead.
I have to go back. The reason why I didn't pursue her friend more, it was because I wasn't really sure if her friend liked me or not. Because I remember asking her friend to like go on a date. And so I was like, hey, let's go grab lunch. And when I did, it was her friend. And then actually she showed up. So it was kind of like she was a third wheel. So I was like, I wonder if she asked her to show up because she wasn't like comfortable like hanging out with me, one-on-one. So that's why I didn't like pursue it any further, So
yeah, for sure. And I will say this, the friend that you were going after, she was a little pretentious. She was definitely a little pretentious. And, I will say this, she went to a Catholic private school that cost a good amount of money. And, no offense to Chris, but at the time it's like he was driving a Buick and like, and it's just like they were like the Jeep driving gals that had like the brand new Jeeps and so it was definitely like the rich poor thing going on. And so I could see that from old girl, the one you were trying to get with, of like, I'm not comfortable with her. But it probably wasn't even anything to do with you. It was just because it's like, he's polar. I don't have,
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Or what's her face probably got jealous and was like, I'm gonna tag along or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
so so I remember because Micah and I were like, and we've always been big into like filming things and all that, and so I had helped a few other people do their school projects, and so my girlfriend, she was doing a school project with all of her friends, and so she asked me to help, and I asked Micah to help. For some odd reason, I don't. Maybe it was just like, oh yeah, Micah, let's go hang out or whatever. So we
And
go
I
over.
was there because it was going to be her and a bunch of females. So I was like, bet me.
Yep.
You bet I'm
Yep.
over there. I'm like,
Yeah.
fine.
So me and Michael went over to my girlfriend's house, which, is his head coach's house.
Head football,
So
yeah.
his head football coach didn't know he was gonna be there, so we're all like hanging out in the kitchen. And so Micah, I'll let you tell the rest of the story.
I just remember he came in, and I'm going to say the guy's full name because I know that he's passed away now. Believe it or not, he's actually gone. But his name was Coach Shuckers, was the other guy. And I remember they came in with their golf bags and everything. And I remember him, and I'm not going to be vulgar because of the podcast here, but he, in certain words, said, "What are you doing here? What the F were you doing here?" is pretty much what that was. And me being the guy that I was at the time, my answer to him was, I don't remember what my answer to him was, but I do remember I made him very uncomfortable because he goes, "Well, has old girl showed you the tour of the house?" And she did not show. They had a pretty big house, and so they were like, "Okay, well, let's give a tour of the house." And he was being nice and gave the tour of the house. But I remember the tour of the house was over with, and this should tell you how I was at age 16, 17, because they showed us his bedroom, where him and his wife, share a bed and everything like that. And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is where the magic cap is, huh, coach?" And I remember the tour was over with after that. I remember he was like, "We're done. We're done." And the only thing
about it from his end, it's like, holy crap, one of my football players is at my house and now they know where I live. Like he was probably like, what the heck?
Because he didn't do that with anybody. He did not do that with anybody. Just like a boss, it's one of those things. It's like, we don't hang out after work. We don't do that. And especially this head football coach, he's like, we don't hang out after this. And really the only reason he was okay with it, because I only remember really hanging out with you at his house a few times, because even though he was okay with it, there was that, and then I remember one dinner. We had one dinner together, and that was it. And it was but it was one of those things to where he said it was cool, but at the same time, you could tell it was very awkward. He was very awkward because, of course, he doesn't want me going and being like, "Oh yeah, I was over at Coach's house, and this and this and this happened," and all this other stuff. So he made sure it was very straight to the point and okay, and he was. I even remember after that little tour, I don't even think we saw him the rest of the time. I think he went and hid somewhere. He was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to be a part of y'all doing whatever y'all are doing." But I remember there were several times where, after practice, after a game, things like that, he was like, "Hey, what's going on with them?" Because his daughter was not very forthright with him and would not really tell him anything, like most teenagers, right? And so I kind of became his little tidbits of information. And I think that was the only reason that he liked me, was just because it's okay, I'm keeping tabs on him. But they actually ended up really liking you over time. It was one of those things to where they really ended up liking you over time, and even coach really liked you over time. But at first, it was definitely one of those things of he made it very clear of if something happens between them, it's on you too. It was one of those things of oh boy.
You also have to think the kind of guys that she did date were jerks, and so I was probably, not to toot my own horn, but I was probably different from the type of guy, because most of the guys she dated were those hey, rich, preppy,
Private school boys.
Private school boys, and so I was just a good old guy from Richmond County. So fast forward, I'll speed this up along. I mean, again, she was the only child, and so I remember because we only dated for 3 months. We were talking since August, and then we officially got together in October, and then we broke up before her birthday. I remember that for sure. And so I remember there would be times during school I would get this is when Snapchat first came out, and I had Snapchat. Stupid now, but so I would get like snaps from her, but it would be this guy in her class that was like snapping me, and I'd be like, "Hey, bro, like." Who's this? She's like, oh, that's my friend. She called him Germany because he was from Germany. Oh, that's my friend Germany. Like, this and that. Like, he's just my friend. And I remember one time after school, I was going to go meet her at the mall. And this guy Germany was there. And I was like, okay, like, because it was like her friends and then Germany and then her. It was like, oh, yeah, we just came to the mall to hang out and like study or whatever. So I remember after walking around the mall, I was kind of like, okay, and then she was like, hey, can you go walk with me to my Jeep because Germany has to get his stuff out of my car? And I was like, I remember I was very upset about that, like very, very upset about that. And so I was just like, okay. I remember I didn't say like 2 words to the dude because I was like, bro, like, I know what you're trying to do type deal. So
Yeah, for sure.
then I remember we broke up. It was like a week or 2 before her birthday, and it was weird because I went over to hang out just like normal, and like I told this story on the audio version of the podcast. But I remember we were watching a presidential documentary on PBS, and it was going through all the presidents. So I remember like at certain points it was like, because she would keep going back and forth at like. So at George Washington, like she started, being cuddly and like, but then like right around Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, she was like pulling away and like just kind of something was off. I could tell it was something off. And I was like, hey, like what's going on? And then I remember it was like, okay, Martin Van Buren, Abraham Lincoln, she was good again. Like she kept doing this between each of the presidents. I remember it was that Teddy Roosevelt, that's when I was like, hey, like something's up, like what's going on? And she was like, I just want to break up or take a break, I think it was. She said take a break. She didn't say officially.
I don't know about you, but I feel like that was the term. Like, I know that's still a thing now, but I feel like that was the term for breakup at that point. Like, nobody said breakup. It was always like, we're going to take a break. Like, if we take a break, that means you're done. Like, that means you're done. I feel like everybody just took a break, and that just means you're done.
She was like, well, we're going to take a pause because, like, I have volleyball, I have school, like, I have a lot more. And I said, okay, I understand. Like, but she would still, like, it was kind of like having her cake and eating it, too. So she would still, like, she'd still text me and this and that. And then I remember like going to one of her volleyball tournaments in Charlotte, North Carolina. Crazy.
Full circle again.
Circle again. Which, by the way, I did move to Charlotte, North Carolina. If y'all haven't picked up on that, so crazy stuff. We'll get in that later. So went to Charlotte. I remember going to a volleyball tournament. I drove like 2.5 hours. I remember being like, what the heck? Like, because at that point, she was still giving me, like, inklings, like, we might get back together type deal. So then I remember at our volleyball tournament, like, at the end, she was like, you know what? We're done. Like, like, she was straight up and honest with me. And I remember, like, having to drive 2.5 hours home. And I called Micah. I was like, bro, like, I need to crash at your house, bro. Like, I just can't, like, because I was not in a good spot. So... but then what's crazy is like I had asked her to go to prom with me like probably in December, and my prom wasn't until April, and so I was like, well, I'm not taking her to prom, duh. And so I asked somebody else, and she got mad. That and I was like, we broke up. Like, hold up, no. But she actually ended up getting with that guy Germany probably like a month. She went to prom with him. She did go to a prom with him.
But you know what else is wild? So this was your senior year. Fast forward even a few months from prom when you're graduating. I remember your graduation party. So Chris had moved on.
Yeah.
Right? And literally
that.
there was, and I was like, this is what was wild to me was, so how Chris's graduation party kind of went was we had almost like a head table where like kind of we were like, it was like me and him and like his mom was sitting there and kind of everybody was like out in the crowd, right? And Chris had been talking to this girl like off and on for a few years. Like, I mean, it wasn't like a for sure thing, but it was like, yeah, we'll talk and have a good time. And she knew that we were moving to Texas, so she knew it wasn't a thing, but at the same time, it was just kind of a flirtatious thing, right? Really wasn't them dating or anything like that. But I remember this girl and like the girl that he was dating before here, the coach's daughter, and her mom came to this graduation party and she was mad. She was like, "Who is this girl? What's her," like I remember she came to me and was like, "What's her story? What's going on with them?" And like she was like almost possessive about it. Like she was very, very
She still
she
wanted
was
to have her cake and eat it too. Like,
very much so, very
oh,
much so, which
bro.
was wild to me because it's like, yeah, y'all done broke up. What you asking the questions for?
So let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to a year later. I've moved to Texas, everything like that. I'm coming back to visit my family for the first time. Like, I go back and I run into her at the movie theater, and because somehow I think I had posted like, "Hey, going to the movies with my brother." Da, 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 da. And she was like hitting up my brother. Was like, "Hey, which theater y'all at?" And I remember like I walked outside and there she was, and she was like, "Hey, how's it going?" I was like, I remember my brother. He didn't tell me this to my face, but he told my mom. He was like, "Yeah, I felt so bad for Christopher." Like he's like, I felt so bad because yeah, she would still try to act that way. Like I'm like, we're not dating anymore. And I remember like when I told her like I was moving to Texas, like I remember being like, at this point, I found out I was getting into Texas Tech probably around March. Yeah, March. And
March, yeah.
at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to see any of you jokers again. Like, I don't care about nobody. Like, peace out. Um, so I told her, I was like, hey, I'm moving to, bro. And she was crying. And I was like, bro, like, we're not, like, we're
We're not
broken.
even dating.
Like, dude. And she ended up dating that Germany guy. They were actually engaged, man. Like, they were engaged for a while.
I didn't know that. I knew they dated, but I didn't know they were engaged. But you know, another thing too is now she's married to a caveman. Like she's married to the Geico caveman. So that's cool.
That was the time that I almost got Micah kicked off the football team. After, let me ask you. I know we were moving to Texas, and we'll wrap this
Yeah.
segment up. But after we broke up, did that affect you and the head coach's relationship? Because she was the one who broke up with me. So
Yeah, no, because you know what? I'll tell you this much. So her mom really liked you, like a ton. I would imagine that her dad, the coach, liked you too, because no, it didn't really change a whole lot. But then again, I mean, even it wasn't too long after the football season wrapped up that it was like, yeah, I'm moving to Texas. And I remember his more idea was like, I mean, just like any other coach was like, dang, like we need you next year. I think that was largely what happened. I don't, it really didn't ever come up again. I remember he was like, I remember he had the conversation with me. It was after a weightlifting session. Like we just got done weightlifting and he was like, yeah, I heard they broke up. What happened? And I was just like, I don't know. You'll have to ask them because I wasn't going to divulge those things. And he was just like, oh, all right, all right. And after that, I never really heard anything about it. The only thing I really heard was all football related. You know, are you sure you're not going to stay? It was always like, are you sure you're not going to stay? You know, is if you know we can figure something out. It's like, no, I'm not going to stay. I wanted to go to Texas, dude. I was like, listen, I'm about to go play football. And he was actually very, very gracious. He actually ended up sending the new coach over in Texas all of my game film. Like he ended up, you know, providing all of that. So no, I don't think so. I think it was really just the apprehension at first of like, who is this guy? And not just that, I'm sure he was nervous because, you know, there was a connection to one of his players now and things like that. So I'm sure that at first it was just a lot of that apprehension of like, make sure that nothing happens. And, you know, if you were a jerk to her, oh, I guarantee you, like there would have been repercussions on my end. I can almost guarantee you that for sure. But luckily, thank God you're a good man and you treated her well and nothing really happened out of that deal. But the threat was definitely there at the beginning.
Yeah, crazy times, man. I'm glad that I didn't get you kicked off the football team.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's time to move on to our next segment, which is the Jaily Donut, and that's the jail report. So,
Yes,
Micah,
sir.
what you got for us?
Man, I got some crazy jail report stories here. The first one comes out of the state of Oklahoma. We all know Oklahoma can be a little bonkers sometimes, but we've talked about a story similar to this in the past. But we've talked about a guy stealing an ambulance before, but we've never talked about a guy stealing an ambulance to make his court date. So there was a man in Oklahoma, and he didn't have a ride to court, but he wanted to make his court date. So the first available vehicle that apparently he found was the county ambulance. And so he ended up stealing the county ambulance and taking it to the courthouse, which by the time he made it to the courthouse, of course, the ambulance had already been reported stolen and everything like that. So he showed up to the courthouse right in time to get arrested for that crime as well. And so he was arrested promptly once he got to the courthouse, and he was charged with auto theft. But hey, apparently he was punctual. Apparently he made it on time to his court date.
There's a lesson in this. Do not let circumstances stop you. Because this man found a way. He said, I ain't got a ride, but you know what? This is important for me to make. He had his priorities right. I will say that. He did want to be there at the court to make sure he made his court date. And if he was on time, that means he took it seriously. Now, how he went about it, not great, but he found a way. So there's always a way, but don't steal or cars.
All you jokers that are like, I can't make my court date, I'm not saying to steal an ambulance, but look at this guy's determination, okay? Just look at his determination and think about this. Yeah, he was like, you know what? I'm going to persevere no matter what the situation is. But he was charged with vehicle theft after that. All right, so
right place.
yeah, it was. The execution was not there, however. All right. So the next one, we gotta love the state of Florida. You know, I swear this jelly donut could be sponsored by the state of Florida.
Florida.
You know, I really, yeah, exactly. It's like Florida. And, you know, I really appreciate Florida for making all of their records extremely public down to the last detail. But this happened in the state of Florida. And of course, it involves an alligator. A Florida man throws an alligator into the drive-thru window after they got their order wrong at a fast food restaurant. So this was at a Burger King, and a Florida man thought his fast food order was wrong, needed a little bit more excitement. So he tossed it was a baby alligator, it was a 3-foot alligator into the fast food restaurant. Nobody was hurt. The employees were incredibly fearful. They ended up wrangling this said alligator, which was then released back into the wild. But yes, he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. And, you know, I'm sure in Florida, this was not the first assault with a deadly weapon that involved an alligator. I don't think so. The other one was an unlawful possession of alligator. That was his second charge. So, hey, you know, he said, you didn't get my order right. I ordered a double Whopper, not a single. I'm going to give you a Whopper of a alligator right through the window. And that's what ended up happening.
So what I'm hearing is that there is lawful possession of an alligator. Because if there's an unlawful possession of an alligator somewhere, there it is. I guess you can own an alligator.
Yeah.
I guess.
I'm sure, because, I mean, they have those, like, alligator farm shows that they do and things like that. So I'm sure you can have a license in the state of Florida and like, have a lawful possession of an alligator. But, you know, being Florida, I mean, homie might have just went to the dang swamp and been like, you know what, here's a 3-foot alligator. Let me grab them, right? Because, I mean, like, 3 foot, yeah, they're strong and powerful, but, like, they're still big and small enough to where you can grab them.
Who
they're
that
not
sounds
huge.
like? That sounds like the shift leader. The shift leader, like,
oh, the shift leader, yeah.
I'm from McDonald's. I'm pulling up the Wendy's. This is a drive-by.
Yeah, if y'all haven't seen those reels,
I've seen it. Go watch the shift leader. He's hilarious. I love watching him.
He's hilarious. Yeah, he's got some great videos. Okay, the next one here. There was a man with a crime pays tattoo that was on his face that got caught after a high-speed pursuit. So his charges were resisting a law enforcement officer and reckless driving. But the whole story is about the irony that would be this guy. So this guy went on a high-speed pursuit because he already had a warrant, right? And whenever he got arrested, find out he had a tattoo on his face that says crime pays right across his face. And so come to find out, he gets arrested and gets 15 years. So yes, crime does actually pay, sir. You're right, it does. And so that was more of the irony of that story there.
I'm gonna use a line from Mr. Jamie himself. The wages of sin is death, and he's earning his wages.
He's earning his wages, yes, sir. All right, this next one comes out of the state of Louisiana. I was just there this past week, and there's all sorts of crazy stuff that be going on in Louisiana. This drunk man.
Fries My Doughnuts on Shreveport, but go ahead.
Lord, yeah, especially after the experience we had a few weeks ago. That's definitely going to be on our old-fashioned donut at some point. But anyways, so a drunk man tries to bribe a cop at the Taco Bell there in Louisiana. So a man was pulled over in suspicion of drunk driving, and he pulls over in the Taco Bell parking lot. He tried to bribe the officers with Taco Bell and said, if you let me go, I will buy you, quote, and this is a quote, if you let me go, I will buy you all a Crunchwrap Supreme. Unfortunately for him, the cops were not amused and said no to the Crunchwrap Supreme and still arrested him for DUI. And then they also tacked on the charge of bribery. So they were not happy with his little bribe attempt of a Crunchwrap Supreme, apparently.
It's like, okay, filet mignon, steak dinner, like even Chick-fil-A, but Crunchwrap Supreme from Taco Bell, no, sir. No.
Listen, they didn't even have to conduct a field sobriety test. That already tells you he's drunk. It's like, yeah, I'll buy you a Crunchwrap Supreme, you let me go. It's just wild to me. It's crazy. All right, so this next one comes from the state of Georgia. We all know about the state of Georgia. We've heard stories about this on the Jelly Donut in the past. But we're going to go into this one. A man calls 911 to complain about his McDonald's order. He was charged with the misuse of 911. The man from the state of Georgia was so upset about his McDonald's order, he called 911 to report a crime. And then when officers arrived and complained, he complained that their cold fries was the main issue of his complaint. They said, hey, that's not an emergency, but the man refused to leave the McDonald's. So after arguing with the officers, they discovered he had an active warrant as well. So he was not only arrested for the active warrant, but also for the misuse of 911 and also trespassing because he refused to leave. So
you have an active warrant, but then again, some people don't know they have active warrants sometimes, but...
Sometimes, but at the same time, when people are dumb like that and be calling, it reminds me of there's a few Cops episodes. You've seen pretty much all of them, but there's a few Cops episodes where people will call and be like, yeah, this lady, she gave me fake crack and I'm trying to get they gave me plaster or something and I'm trying to get my money back. And the cops show up and they're like, you're trying to get me to give you her money back, but you were trying to buy drugs in the first place? Like, are you insane? Like, what are you doing?
An exact episode of that, and I know I can see it because it's in a trailer park.
Yeah, you know what episode I'm talking about too. I guarantee you do.
There's one is like, she's like, no, I wasn't trying to rip her off. She's like, I don't sell drugs. She's like, I'm a prostitute.
I'm a prostitute. Yep, that's the one I'm talking about. That's the exact one I'm talking about. Which another cameo from my cat here. What's up, Blanche? All right. So the next one here, a woman uses a fake $1 million bill at Walmart trying to pay out at Walmart. This happened in Tennessee. A woman in Tennessee walked into a Walmart very confidently and tried to pay her groceries with a $1 million fake bill. And we've all seen these like weird fake $1 million bills. I've even, back in the day, I feel like this was like definitely an early 2000s thing. I remember like $1 million bills, but it had like Bill Clinton as do you remember those?
Do you remember the $1 million bills, but it was a gospel message on them, and you would like...
Yeah, I remember that one too.
People could like pick them up and be like, what? And then they like read the one, and it's like, do you want to give your life to Jesus?
It was like a gospel track. It was literally a gospel. Most people don't know what gospel tracks are, but it was a clever gospel track. But yeah, she tried to pay with this $1 million bill, and of course, the cashier said, yeah, we don't take that. So she got mad that they would not accept it. And so pretty much what ended up happening is she got so belligerent that they ended up calling the cops. They ended up arresting her for trespassing because she refused to leave because they weren't taking her $1 million bill. She also insisted, and this was a quote, that the U.S. Treasury made this bill and it was way more than what the groceries cost. So you should give me my change now. And I'm saying that very politely with what the quote says. There's a lot of vulgar language in there, too. She must have been at least drunk or on something. There's no way that you do that sober.
You have a $1 million bill. There's no way they're going to be able to give you change for that. Like, come on. Like,
it's like, listen, my groceries were $200. I want, 1.9 like $1.99 million back. Or $0.99 million back. All All right, this one is my favorite one out of the entire list that I put together here. A man was arrested in Oregon for playing the bagpipes while driving. So he was arrested for reckless driving, but the Oregon police pulled over this driver for swerving erratically. They thought he was drunk, so they actually pulled him out of the vehicle and did a field sobriety test. Come to find out, he was not drunk. He was practicing his bagpipes, and whenever he was pulled over, he told the officers that he was really feeling the music and didn't notice that he was all over the road. Also, when they asked him further, okay, why were you playing the bagpipes? Apparently, he had some sort of Scottish event that he was going to a little later. And so he was practicing in the car on his bagpipes while driving. So, he traded his bagpipes for some handcuffs, apparently, and got arrested for reckless driving. It must have been bad enough to arrest him. I mean, that must have been pretty bad driving.
Bagpipes while driving, like playing the bagpipes are hard.
It's already hard. Yeah, it's already pretty hard. So that's pretty wild to be doing that while driving. I mean, how do you have your hands on the wheels? I mean, bagpipes are like a two-handed deal. So, I mean, maybe driving with your knees or something. I don't know, man. But, all right, so we got a couple more. This one actually did not happen in the United States. It happened in the United Kingdom. A suspect hides from the police in a giant teddy bear. So there was a man who was wanted for stealing a car, and he decided to hide from police by cutting open a giant teddy bear and climbing inside. Officers only found him because they could notice the bear breathing and moving back and forth. So they looked and found that there was a slit in the throat of the bear. When they lifted the head up, that's when they found the suspect. And so he ended up getting arrested. They actually also took the bear in for evidence. So could you imagine that court case where it's like, yep, Your Honor, here's the giant bear that he hid in, but he was arrested for car theft and resisting arrest. Very unique. I mean, yes, you're trying to hide. I get that. But in a giant bear, that's a little tough to do, I would imagine.
Genius.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we got a couple more. So a man in a cow costume in the state of Virginia steals 26 gallons of milk from a Walmart. So he was, of course, charged with theft, but a man in a full cow costume walked into Walmart and tried to stuff these 26 gallons of milk into his cow costume. When he was caught, he attempted to moo and said, "I identify as a cow," to try to get away with it. So he also tried to make a stealthy escape by crawling on all fours, which the cops ended up finding him and arresting him.
Even if you get all of the gallons of milk stuffed in your costume, that's heavy. Those are heavy. Just like 3 or 4 of those, that's heavy.
Yeah, it's pretty darn heavy. I couldn't imagine. Like, this guy full on was like, identify as a cow. We're going to do this thing. So that's crazy to me. All right. So the very last one here, number 10. A man was arrested for breaking into jail. Most people want to break out of jail. This guy wanted to break into the jail.
Story. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you remember this one? So he was charged with trespassing, but usually, of course, they try to break out. He scaled the fence of this Texas jail, claiming he was looking for a friend who was arrested. And authorities found him walking the yard and arrested him promptly. I mean, good friend, I guess.
How do you make it past the razor wire?
I don't know, but apparently he got in. He got in somehow. But, most people are not looking to get in there. So, pretty interesting. We're going to have to pause right quick. All right, man. Well, that was a great Jelly Donut segment. It's always really fun. Some of those arrest stories are just wild, man. I don't know. Throwing alligators into drive-thrus, all that stuff is just crazy. But we are moving on to our next segment, which is the Doughnut Hole, which is a random thing that we choose to have. And, here lately we've been just doing quizzes. And so, Christopher, you get a nice quiz from your old buddy, Micah, on the origin of certain sayings. So I've got a multiple choice quiz for you. 10 questions of where these origins of sayings are coming from. And basically you have to guess what the saying is based on the origin. So are you ready to start it off?
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And I know that was kind of confusing, but you'll see what I'm talking about on this first question, okay? In medieval England, people believed that ringing church bells during a storm would ward off evil spirits that cause thunder and lightning. Which phrase comes from this practice? Is it A?
Got it.
What's up?
Is it, can I guess? Is it Saved by the Bell?
It is Saved by the Bell. Wow, you already knew that one. Okay.
I
So,
thought,
yeah.
I actually thought the meaning of that was, and you looked this up, so it's the right one, but I always thought it was back when they buried people and they had pronounced people dead before they actually knew they were dead, and they attached the
Right.
bell to their wrist. So I thought that's where that originated from, but I guess not.
Yeah, me too. But apparently, according to this, Saved by the Bell was ringing those church bells to ward off the evil spirits caused by thunder and lightning. So,
And also to ward off the weird Zach Morris. Just
yeah,
kidding.
right, exactly. Every time I hear Saved by the Bell, I always think about that. Him and AC Slater and old what Screech.
All right.
Yeah, I know, right? All right. This next question. This phrase originated from ancient Rome. It was where public officials would scratch messages into wax tablets. So if a mistake was made, they would smooth the wax and rewrite it. So A, was it wipe the slate clean? B, is it cut and dry? C, is it paper over the cracks? Or D, is it etched in stone?
I'm going to go with A. Wipe the slate clean.
That's correct. Yep. Wipe the slate clean is the term for that. That was one I did not know. I didn't know where wipe the slate clean, clean can
I
come
didn't
from.
know it originated so long ago. I thought it was kind of a 1700, 1800.
I would have guessed 1800s. I don't know why. I would have guessed 1800s for that one. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that one. Okay, so the next one here. This one comes from the 18th century, naval warfare. So sailors in battle had to be careful not to step on coiled ropes used to fire the cannons, as misstepping would lead into injuries or misfires. Which phrase comes from this? Is it A?
Let me guess.
Go ahead.
Show me the ropes. Show them the ropes. Is that right?
Actually, no. That is not correct. All right. So, is it A, being a loose cannon? B, towing the line? C, by the book? Or D, hold your fire?
I'm going to say toe the line. That's what I'm going to say.
That's correct. Yep, that is correct. Towing the line is the term used for watching your feet while you're walking around so that you don't accidentally fire or accidentally don't get dragged overboard by this line. All right, so hey, you're 3 for 3. I'm not going to count that first guess because you didn't know all the answers first. So, all right, so number 4. Which phrase comes from an Old English law stating that a husband could beat his wife with a stick, provided that it was no thicker than his thumb? I think this is a very easy one here. You want to go ahead and guess what it would be before I tell you A, B, and C, and D?
Choices.
Is it A, you're under one's thumb? B, the
the
rule of thumb?
Yeah,
it is the rule of thumb. It is the
Wow.
rule of thumb.
I didn't know that's where. I thought it was like, hey, you're using your thumb to measure. Like, I always thought it was like, you use your thumb to measure like inches or something.
That's what I thought it was something like that too, but apparently it was the Old English law that a husband could beat his wife with a stick, but it could be no thicker than your thumb. So domestic violence is not cool, kids.
I'm probably going to stop using that phrase.
Yeah, right. It's pretty dark phrase. Some of these phrases are way darker than you would think they were. All right, so this phrase originates from medieval Europe when knights would send a challenge by throwing down an armored glove, requiring the recipient to accept or decline the fight. Is it A, throwing in the towel, B, dropping the ball, C, laying down the law, or D, throwing the gauntlet down?
Throwing the gauntlet. That's what I was going to say.
Throwing the gauntlet. That was a pretty easy one. Yep. But yeah, throwing the gauntlet down. And that was a symbol of, hey, you're either going to fight me or you're going to back out and be a chicken and you're not going to fight me. So that was a whole thing. All right. 17th century. In English pubs and taverns, it was often kept a tally of what a patron owed by making marks on a wooden board. This phrase comes from that practice. Was it A, square up, B, keeping tabs, C, on the house, or D, running up the bill?
I'm going to say square up. Is that right?
No, it was actually keeping tabs. It was keeping tabs. So,
well, I don't know if you know, but in 17th century England, they had saloons and they had a thing called the Big Steer Steakhouse
Oh yeah.
where they would have prairie schooners, and in the middle of Pennsylvania, it was the Wild West. I didn't know
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
knew.
Yeah, and there was a guy named Jay Moosey, and he had a dinner at one point with like crusted pecan,
Oh,
green beans.
Did you also know that Thanksgiving, the actual became a national holiday, and they celebrated worldwide, and they would have a meal, and they used ovens, and they had pumpkin pie and dressing.
Yeah,
Did you know
all
that?
that stuff. Now, I knew that. I knew that as
Did
well.
you also
Now,
know? No, I'm just kidding. We'll keep going.
just to elaborate, there's a terrible book out there that is very horribly historically context, and so we're joking
Yeah,
about that.
Benjamin Franklin, Antonio Gaudi, Vivaldi,
Antonio Vivaldi,
yeah, and all of these guys are all alive during the same time apparently. But
all in the same time, and it's like the revolution happened, but then it didn't happen. And then there's the Wild West and prairie schooners and all this other crap. So it's very interesting.
all
All right.
let's continue.
So, which phrase originates from 16th century Italy, where dishonest merchants would cheat customers by filling a bag with straw and only placing real goods at the top? Kind of like it's happening in America when you buy your chip bag and there's only a little bit of chips and mostly air. Anyways, is that buying a pig in a poke, letting the cat out of the bag, pulling wool over one's eyes, or crooked as a barrel of fish hooks? Which term comes from?
I'm gonna say pull the wool over the eyes.
Actually, it is letting the cat out of the bag. That is
So,
actually where that
how
comes
does
from.
that relate to each other?
So what they're saying, what it says is it's related because filling the bag of straw at the bottom and things like that, sometimes it would be a cat or something like that that's in this bag. And so once it lets out of the bag, you see the actual contents of the bag is not what you thought it was going to be. That's what it says. I don't know. I guess 16th century Italy was a different time. I mean, 1500s was different, I guess. But apparently that's where cat out of the bag came from.
Okay.
All right. So this phrase comes from an old blacksmithing technique where metal had to be heated to the perfect temperature before being shaped. What term comes from that? Is it A, striking while the iron is hot, B, burning the candle at both ends, C, hot off the press, or D, forge ahead?
It's A.
It is.
While
It's
the
A.
iron is hot.
Striking while the iron is hot is about the old blacksmithing routine. All right, we got a couple more here. In the 19th century theater, a type of candle was used as stage lighting. When actors were performing a particularly dramatic or important role, they would step closer to the brightest part of the stage. Which phrase comes from this? Is it A, taking center stage? Is it B, stealing the show? Is it C, being in the limelight? Or D, being the scene stealer?
I would say being in the limelight, because that would make
That's
sense,
correct. Yep, that's correct. It's being in the limelight, is stepping into the main light, that it would be the spotlight, so to speak, back in the day. All right, so pretty much you've gone 90%. You've only gotten one off to this point. Let's see how you do on the very last one here. Which phrase comes from horse racing, where the bookmakers would bet odds on long shots in separate parts of their records, referring to competitors who are extremely unlikely to win? Was it B, off the records, C, the wild cards, D, not in the cards, or D, not, man, I've got the letters all mixed up. Okay, off the record, wild cards, not in the cards, or dark horse?
Dark horse.
It is the dark horse. So a dark horse
This is the one I was
is the
gonna
long
get.
shot. Yeah. So that is the answer to that. So yeah, you did good, man. 90%. I can't get my letters right apparently, but you got 90% on that. So good job. Some of those origins, they make sense, but you're kind of going, I wasn't expecting that one. I didn't expect them to come from those origins. So it's quite interesting. But I'll tell you this much, maybe something that's a little unexpected from you, Christopher, is the anger that comes from what fries my donuts. So what has got you fired up, man?
So I talked about it in the intro, but I'm going to pivot because originally I was going to talk about politics. And as I was sitting here doing the show, I was like, I don't think I feel like I want to do that. So sorry, guys, if you were expecting a rant on politics. I'm going to totally pivot, totally change. This still does fire me up. And this doesn't happen to me now, but I feel like it bleeds into life. And so one of the things that really fries my donuts is in schools. Do you remember what they used to have called Socratic seminars? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Or group discussions. So basically, group discussions, and you would have a topic or whatever, and you would get a grade off these group discussions. Now, why I get so fried up about this is because if you're getting a grade on group discussions, what's always going to happen is, and this happens with people, there will be 2 or 3 people that will monopolize the conversation, and then the other people cannot get a word in edgewise. So if my grade is being based upon a group discussion, and you have those 2 or 3 people, and I can't get in a word in edgewise, that's not okay. I remember when I was doing an honors program, and the way that they would give you a test to see if you got into the program was, so if you did history, my area was history. So how they did this was they were like, okay, you're a senator from this state. They gave you this state, and each person got a different state. You guys are now going to debate the issue of blank. And you would be in a room of, I don't know, 20 other people, but it wasn't like moderated or regulated. So what would happen is that 2 or 3 people would monopolize and dominate the conversation, and then everybody else would try to jump in and get a word in edgewise. But if you didn't speak up, then it was like, okay, you're not in. So even if you spoke up only once, pretty much they wanted to see who was going to monopolize this conversation. And this was to do with history. And it really frustrated me because there are people that, and everyone needs people, but they just tend to monopolize the conversation, like when you're in a group setting. So then the people who have thoughts to share, they never get a word in edgewise. And so you see that in small groups. You see that like any kind of setting, people will hijack the conversation, and there's not a room for inclusion. And then people get mad, and it's like, well, how come you never speak up? And it's like, I never get a chance to speak up because there are always people. So I just don't like that. Like, I don't like the whole Socratic seminar process in schools. Do I think it's helpful? Sometimes, yes, but I think it just gives opportunity for people who normally are outgoing to get a good grade, and then it penalizes the people who normally are like, hey, I have something to say, but I can't share because these people are, I don't know. I've always felt that way, and maybe it's just me because I'm a natural reserved person, but I always feel like I have to fight to like share things. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. And again, I was going to say that too. I think a lot of that has to do with personality types because, you know, and I've changed over the years. I was definitely, I hate to say this, but I was definitely the guy who did monopolize a lot of the conversation. I remember when I was in my AP government class, we had debate Fridays, and every Friday was a debate that we would have. Again, it was government related. So it was, you know, on a political issue of some sort. Now, the way that my teacher did this, and some people agree with it, some people disagree with it. I agreed with it, and I can see where she was coming from. But again, I was the big cowboy type at the time. So, like, she would always pick the extreme liberal views, and she would always pit us up against the people who were extremely liberal, but give them the conservative view, right? And the whole point is if you know well enough to debate it, you're going to know in depth on, you know, all their issues and things like that. So for instance, I remember gun control was one at one point where it's like, okay, you're advocating for more gun control, even though that's not something I believed in. And then the opposite front is not. But the thing was, doesn't matter. It was always groups of 3. Like, it was always 3 versus 3. And it was always me versus this girl named Eileen. I don't know why. Like, it was always between her and I. And the teacher, I think it was just entertainment for her because she always knew that we were just going to, because we would research the crap out of this thing, right? We would research so would my colleagues, so would the people on the team with me, right? But what ended up happening is, like Chris said, we would monopolize the entire thing because it almost became personal. It wasn't just, okay, it's a debate, but it almost became personal. And what's interesting that I never really thought about until you just said it is like that in a lot of other fronts. Now I've changed over the years because one, not that I'm reserved as a person, but I hate getting interrupted. I hate when people interrupt other people. I hate to do. I did this. Listen, I'm a prime proponent of this. Even when Chris was talking, I somewhat interrupt him, and I try to stop doing that because my thing is it's very natural that you want to do that, especially with friends and with other things. But I can't stand being interrupted, and I don't like interrupting other people. And so the thing is, if they're making points, if they're doing things, especially in a professional environment and things like that, to me, if I interrupt them, it makes them look incompetent. It makes them look not like they don't know what they're talking about, and I'm trying to strong arm the situation, and I don't like that at all. And so, no, I understand exactly what you're saying. I think there is a place for debate, but a lot of the times, what ended up happening in those debates, I remember I would think about these things mid go and go, oh my gosh, I've talked pretty much 75% of our time that we have for this debate. And I remember even telling them, okay, hey, I'm going to let these couple people, Eileen, stop talking. Let's let the other people talk because they're not going to get a grade. They're going to get a bad grade. And it's because they don't want to be rude. And that's what it comes down to. They don't want to be rude. They don't want to interrupt you, and you're going back and forth and everything. And when is a good time when you're really in depth on a point to go, okay, let me say my piece. And so, no, I understand that completely. And so a lot of times in professional environments now, sometimes I won't say anything because people are just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I'm not going to get in between them. I'm not going to get in between them going back and forth. If they're going back and forth, that's between them. I'm not getting into it. But then next thing you know, it's like, well, if you felt that way, why didn't you say something about it? And it's like, when did I have the time to do that? When am I going to jump in there? And so, no, I definitely understand what you're saying.
And what is hard is a lot of people were like, oh, you're just quiet. You never speak up. You don't say it. And it's kind of like, when do I have the time to speak up? Like, because a lot of times what happens, and this is just natural people, it's like, okay, those people will talk and they'll monopolize the conversation and then they'll move on, right? Like they'll move on to another point. So it's like, okay, we've already moved on. So what I appreciate, and I try to be sensitive, like if I'm in a group setting, most of the time people have thoughts. You just have to ask them directly, like, hey, so and so, what do you think about this? Like, and I feel like that helps people get out of the. I mean, a lot of times they'll share, they'll be like, well, da 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 da. What do you think? And so if I'm ever in a group setting, especially like I'm in the church world now, but like if it's a small group setting and we're asking questions, I'll make everyone answer because I'll be like, I'm calling on you, just be ready. Like if you haven't shared, like you're going to share, because I feel like that helps people know, hey, like my opinion is valid. But yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day, and I was like, man, that makes me mad. Like when we would get grades on these Socratic seminars, and like it's cool if we have them, but to give people a grade on that in the school system, it's not a good idea because the quiet people never get to share, and then they get a bad grade, and it's like, I had stuff, but I never got to share. So,
and I'll say this, there's a lot of things, and we can dive into a whole thing about this, but there's a lot of things that fry my donuts about the education system, because everything that we were told in the education system is, hey, this is setting you up for the real world. And so that's not really setting you up for the real world. Yes, you have debates in a personal or in a professional setting and in a personal setting and things like that. But a lot of the times that's not the case. Typically, even if people are monopolizing the conversation, they're not going to be mad at you for not saying anything. They're actually going to be even happier that you didn't say anything like, hey, don't get in the middle of this. I'm trying to make my point right now. If you try to jump into the middle of it, a lot of times it's not a good thing. A lot of times it's like, nah, you shouldn't have said something right there. Unless you're legitimately trying to defend them if they're being taken advantage of, or if somebody is making an illegitimate point where you're going, okay, you're just bullying the guy. Okay, he needs some sort of support. Or even if it's a subordinate who's getting chewed out by somebody else and you're going, whoa, 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 you don't need to do that. You're out of bounds and here's why. Like, that's different. But 9 times out of 10, like in the environment that I'm in right now, people go back and forth and they're debating on, okay, we should do this, we should do that, we should whatever. And so if you have a valid point, that's one thing. But for the most part, it's like, if you're not the decision makers making the final call, if that's not your final call to make, they don't want to really hear you. They're talking amongst the people who are making those decisions. They're not trying to talk to you right now. And so I think a lot of it's understanding your place, but there's a lot that I feel like school doesn't prepare you for, but there's exercises you have to go through that just are not accurate in life.
For sure. And if you're an extrovert, please help your introvert friends, but because most of the time we want to share, but just ask us, like, try to invite us into the process, like, and I promise, most introverts, they will open up and come out of their shell if you ask them direct questions. Like if you say, hey, what do you think about that? Or da-da-da-da. So help them. But also on the flip side, that's not an excuse for introverts to never speak up, because I'm learning that it's like, bro, you got to speak up and it's uncomfortable. You know, that's just my, I was going to go on a whole rant about how things are going right now in our political system, but I decided to pivot because I feel like that would be contributing to the division and the hate that is being spread right now. So
Yeah,
didn't want to do
absolutely.
that. Didn't want to make the problem worse. So
Absolutely. Yeah. There's even some comments that our president has said about this plane crash that I talked about earlier in this episode. That's like, whatever. But anyways, all right, man, let's move into something a little bit more happy, and that is our mystery donut or our improv segment. And Chris, this is probably the favorite game that we do, and that is Fortunately, Unfortunately. And so I figure we'll do 3 rounds of Fortunately, Unfortunately. We'll get some scenarios. Do you have a scenario that you want to do Fortunately, Unfortunately?
yeah, I would say applying for a loan.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I'll start off with the Fortunately here.
Okay.
Fortunately, I have really good credit, so I should be getting a great deal on this loan.
Unfortunately, times are hard right now, so you're still going to have to pay a very high interest rate.
Fortunately, really and truly, I'm going to have the money next month, so I won't have to pay too much interest because I'll just pay it all off.
Unfortunately, life has a great way of having an unexpected expense come up, so that money is going to have to be used for something else.
Fortunately, I got an extra bonus check from work, so guess what? Extra expense or not, no big deal.
Unfortunately, it was apparently a clerical error, so you're not getting that bonus check.
Clerical error. Fortunately, HR cleared it up, and now I get double bonus check.
Unfortunately, when you try to cash those checks, it was insufficient funds.
Fortunately, I have a very, very bad one that I'm not going to say. Fortunately, I end up finding an extra source of income with my second job, so I'll still be able to pay it off, no problem.
Unfortunately, because you work so many hours at your second job, the rest of your life is falling apart.
Fortunately, I didn't like the rest of my life anyway, so maybe it's time for new beginnings.
Unfortunately, dang it. I can't really say anything because that's a really positive outlook. All right.
All right, we can move to the next one then.
I couldn't think of
All
a
right.
good term for that.
All right, so the next one, fortunately, unfortunately, in a car accident. We're in a car accident.
Okay, fortunately, nobody was seriously injured, and that's what really matters.
Unfortunately, your car's totaled, and you're not making your deductible just yet on your insurance.
Fortunately, I was smart and I got the gap insurance, so it's going to fully cover it.
Unfortunately, due to a clerical error with your insurance, they didn't find that. And so now you have to pay a ton more than expected.
Fortunately, that's not the case because I kept the original paperwork when I got the gap insurance, so...
Unfortunately, it's insurance. So now that you've already paid, try get that money back. It's going to be hard.
Fortunately, my buddy Greg works for that insurance company, so he's going to help me out.
Unfortunately, Greg had a heart attack this morning and is in the hospital.
Fortunately, he's still alive, so that's what really matters.
Unfortunately, he's in a coma and we don't know when he's coming out.
Fortunately, I believe in the power of prayer, so I'm going to pray and he's going to get better.
Unfortunately, I can't fight Jesus, so I guess this scenario is over.
It's done, Steve. All right.
Okay.
I'm gonna think of opening a new restaurant. Opening
Okay.
a new
All right.
restaurant.
Alrighty. Fortunately, I had this great concept of an idea.
Unfortunately, the bank's not going to give you a loan based on your concept or pre-revenue stage.
Fortunately, I went on a Shark Tank and somehow finessed Mark Cuban into a deal.
Unfortunately, that deal didn't go through because Mark Cuban isn't a dummy and he did his research after the deal went through, and so he went back on it.
Fortunately, just being on Shark Tank, a lot of other people liked my concept and I got a bunch of funding.
Unfortunately, they now own 56% of your business, so you're not the majority stakeholder.
Fortunately, they're all restaurant people and actually do how to run it way better than me, who's opening a restaurant for the first time.
Unfortunately, they do know how to run it better than you, and so they're running you out. They're pushing you out of the business.
Fortunately, they're paying to push me out of the business, so it's okay.
Unfortunately, you got a really bad health score because your head chef decided that he wanted to be smoking in the kitchen.
Fortunately, that's fine. I got my money and ran.
Unfortunately, your assets have been frozen because you're getting an audit from the IRS.
Fortunately, the IRS has absolved me of all charges, and now I just get to live my life with the proceeds from the sale of the restaurant.
Do I really want to go there? No, I don't. I'm done. I was going to talk about the current administration, so...
Okay. You're just trying to hit politics at some point in this episode today.
I don't know why I'm on that kick right now. Yeah. Anyways, so that was our improv segment. Hope you enjoyed it. If you were to open a restaurant, though, what kind of restaurant would it be?
Man, so we got a ton of concepts, but really and truly one that we've talked about, and it's actually your idea, is the late night one. I'm not going to say the name because I don't want anybody to steal it.
Oh
but
yeah, I was like,
it's the late night one.
Don't put that concept out there.
No, but it's the late night one. I think that's a really good idea. I would definitely do that for those people out there.
I have never been to Bombshells, but is it like a whole aviation themed restaurant?
Not really. I mean, it's more like, yeah, they have like the Air Force, like kind of World War II pinup gal kind of like vibe to it. And yeah, there's like aviation stuff about it, but I wouldn't say that's the majority of it. No, I think it would be more, I would say it's more like pinup girl styling. Like, I think it's more like that than like, sure, it does have some aviation theming, but I don't think that's the main bit to it.
So it's like one of those restaurants.
It's one of them restaurants.
I've never been to one, so I didn't know what it was.
Now, it's not like the waitresses. Now, it's not like they're like dressed skimpy or nothing like that. But like, no, it's just one of those things. It's more, that's just kind of the styling. Like, yeah, they got pinup girls on the wall, and sure, they'll have like kind of because their main logo is like a blonde gal like riding on a bomb kind of deal, if that makes sense. So,
yep.
Well, anyways, we'll move to our next segment, which is our eclair, which is our positive advice. I don't remember who went first last time, so I'll just go ahead and go first. This has been one that's really been weighing on me, and I thought about this a lot this week. It seems really easy at the time to take the easy way out, and I'm talking to myself too, because there's a lot of times when you're going through a situation and you're faced with the challenge, you're looking at both directions of the road that you could take in life, and it might seem like, man, I've got enough hard things going on. I can take this easy route and it will be fine. I put it to you this way. What I found over my short time on this earth, and I am not perfect, but what I have found is you take the route of the easy way. Not only does that lesson come back, and it comes back sevenfold for you to learn, but you're still doing the work taking the easy way out, but you're not accomplishing anything. This is a parable that I like to use in my own life. When I was a kid, my parents would say, hey, I want you to vacuum the entire house, right? And I was lazy. I didn't want to vacuum the house. And so what I would end up doing, I knew that putting lines in the floor showed like, hey, you vacuumed the house, right? So what I would do is I'd pull the vacuum out and I'd go around the entire house and I'd put lines in the floor without actually running the vacuum. And I didn't really think about that until I became an adult, and it really became clear of, how stupid of me, because if I would have just plugged the darn thing in and vacuumed it, I was still doing the same work trying to get out of the work than I was to just do the work. So what I put to you is this: it's easy to take the easy way out, so to speak. But one, that lesson comes along, and are you just putting lines in the carpet when you could have just plugged the darn thing in and gone through the work and have gone through the lesson, learned the lesson, and be on the other side of it, versus sitting here doing the motions like, yeah, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And before you know it, you're back to the same point all over again, and just keeps going in a cycle and a cycle and a cycle. And all you have to do is just plug the darn thing in. You're already doing the work, and then you're done with it, and you learn the lesson and you can move on.
Yeah, man, for sure, for sure. You're always going to have those lessons come back around. Even if you learn them, there'll be a different level to that lesson, for sure. My eclair, and I'm speaking to myself, and I did this week, so please hear me. I'm not talking at you, I'm talking with you, because I'm talking to myself. Stop projecting how you view yourself onto other people. And what I mean by that is, if you think of yourself and you're looking at yourself through a certain lens, that doesn't necessarily mean everyone else is looking at you through that same lens. It's like, you may think they think I'm weird, they think I'm this, they think I'm that, they think I'm quiet, they think I'm annoying, when in reality, they probably don't think that at all. You think that about yourself, so then you assume everybody else is thinking the same thing that you think about yourself. I had that happen this week, and I've alluded to it. I'm at a new job with new people that I don't know that well, and I think, oh man, they must think I'm quiet or weird, they don't like me, this and that. But I was projecting how I felt about myself onto them. And really, when I asked, like, hey, like, how am I doing? They were like, yeah, we love you. Like, you're doing great. And it's like, all the thoughts that were in my head about myself was like, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. Like, I'm doing a bad job. Like, I was projecting that on myself and then assuming everyone else was looking at me the way I was looking at me. And that's not okay. That's not healthy. And so just know that not everybody is looking at you the same way that you're looking at you. And so take that pressure off yourself, because in the reality is, people probably like you more than you realize. And so if they do, then, and what you consider shortcomings or failures, people probably don't even notice, like, if something goes wrong during a concert, like, unless it's something major, like the sound quits working, or like, but if there wasn't like a specific step or a specific cue that was supposed to happen, or a light cue, nobody's going to know except for the production people. Like, and so if you're doing what you view as a failure, most of the time people are like, what? I didn't know you were doing, like, doesn't look like you're failing to me. So that's my advice. Don't project how you're feeling about yourself onto other people, because most of the time it's not true. Now, if everyone's telling you, hey, bro, like, you're kind of being annoying, then listen.
Yeah, for sure. But I'll even give you an example. We've talked about this on the audio version of the podcast, but I helped Chris with an Easter production this past year. And, I remember I got sick, got food poisoning the few days before, and it was like rush, rush, rush and everything like that. And the morning of Easter, everything went fine. And Chris probably don't even remember this, but I screwed up one of the lines and got one of the segments wrong, to where I almost opened up a segment wrong. And bro, I was beating myself up like you would not believe for that. And talking to everybody afterwards, they're like, even people who knew the program, knew the flow and the thing, they're like, you played it off just fine. Like, we didn't even know that wasn't even a part of the show. And here I am sitting here like, oh my gosh, I screwed up. And Chris is probably ticked, and the whole crowd knew that. And it's like, nobody knew. Nobody even knew. It's like, it wasn't even that big of a deal. And so just prime example. It's just, that stuff happens, but it's all, I hate to say it's all in your head, but a lot of times it's solely with you. And it's like, it depends on, a lot of it, you hear this about sports and everything else. A lot of it is 10% is what you're actually doing. The 90% is your mental. I mean, 90% of it is what you're thinking and things like that and the perception that you're having. So I definitely agree with what you're saying, man. But it's been a fantastic episode of the Doughnut Box Podcast, episode 11. It's already hard to believe that we've wrapped up episode 11. I don't know, man. Once we start talking, it's like it just goes, and before you know it, it's like, oh shoot, we're already at the end here. And so I just want to encourage you guys to go ahead and check out the Doughnut Box Podcast over at the Trash Can Network. That's over at the Trash Can Network on our YouTube and our Facebook page. Go ahead and check out our aviation page, which is Trash Can Travel as well. We got plenty of good things coming out over there. We even made a little tribute video to that unfortunate accident that happened. Not saying go watch it because of that, but at the same time, there's that over there as well. But we also have aviation mysteries coming out for a mysterious plane disappearance that happened over there too. We've got some of that stuff going on. And then even if you enjoy our podcast, but like, man, I don't have an hour to listen to it, we have short segments that come out every single week. Actually, every single day after our podcast airs, we have at least one a day that comes out. So if you're like, man, I enjoy your podcast, but I don't have the time to listen to it because, hey, we've all been there, you can watch the little 30-minute clips and get some of the best parts of the podcast each and every week over at the Doughnut Box Podcast on the Trash Can Network over there. So, that's pretty much all I got, man. You got anything to add to it?
Nope, I think it's time for the starship to take us out. I'm Chris.
And I'm Micah.
And this has been the Doughnut Box Podcast.
Yeah, man.